Okay, so welcome to this BOF. We do this now about every DebConf since 5 years or so. So my name is Paul, and or Albrus, that most of you know me about, and Antonio. This is a BOF, so please bring all your questions, remarks, improvement proposals, or whatever you want to have on the table, either in the pad at the bottom, but please also discuss them for a lively discussion. Just to kick it off, we want to give a small update on the stuff that has changed since last year, just to offer you a feel of the things that happened.
Okay, so on the infrastructure side, we have a few things that happened since last year. One is that S390X is now fully supported, and we are pretty close to getting the same level of support for ARM-EL as well. So that makes us fully supporting 6 of the release architectures. Are those all of them? Are we missing?
Missing MIPSL and
yeah,
MIPS for the 6EL?
we are missing the MIPS ones, and we are prototyping now RISC-V. So we have 6 RISC-V worker nodes provided by the I forgot the name. It's a Chinese university lab that's providing us with access to 6 boards. And we also now have extra archive support. So this was done by Pavit, who is there on her GSOC internship last year. So this...
grab the microphone, please.
To have all supported architectures?
Eventually, yes. If we had MIPS hardware, then we would have MIPS workers.
Yeah, we're not actively seeking out, but it's all of them came to us, so that's how we added stuff.
Right. So yeah. So on the extract archive support, that's support for adding external repositories to specific test jobs. So for instance, you can have your own repository that you want to test, and you can add that repository together with the official Debian repository. So this is now already being used for the security archive. So the security team is triggering tests for the security updates, including the embargoed ones. So Pavit's work included making some tests private for the duration of the embargo.
But maybe teams like the PostgreSQL team also wants to use this kind of facility to test their suites. Yeah. It's there.
Okay. And we are now experimenting with pre-testing transitions. So the idea is that if you have an external repository with test rebuild for a transition, we can test the stuff in the archive against that repository already. So we can see the problems that are going to happen before they happen on the official repository. So the Perl team tried to use this for the last build transition, but we found some limitations in the infrastructure that prevented that from working. And the Ruby team is going to try it now for the next interpreted transition. I was actually working on this during the break. And then if other teams want to use this is available. You just need to talk to us, because since this is installing arbitrary packages on the test beds, we are not allowing any repository, so we have to enable each repository before you can use it by name. We also had several UI improvements done by Abiola. I think she is not here. So she was an outreach intern in the round that started last December, and she did a lot of improvements on the website UI.
Yeah, so we started, I think, last year a project on our Salsa account to start helping others. So that's a place, if you have questions about your tools, like Zico already put them there. Unfortunately, it's of course extra time consuming, so we were not able to put the time in that we want, but we still, this is a good place to post the problems that you're experiencing and also make it visible to others. So in the end, not only us, I mean everybody can help out, but that's the place where we try and collect these kind of help requests. On the front of autopkgtest, the package, quite some work was done on QEMU by the people mentioned here, and a new backend was added by Jochem, the unshared backend, and quite a few other small improvements and bug fixes were contributed by others, which a lot of thanks for those. The next item is a funny find and a bit of an open question maybe for this BOF to discuss, or not, but it's a question that I sort of had, is some of the packages actually fail to run if you give them lots of cores and lots of RAM. That's particularly in cases where tests try to use every core that they can find, and some implementations require more and more RAM the more cores you have. I think one of the compression algorithms, if you just say use all the cores, it just blows up. Not so nice for the infrastructure, because then we have to repair. I'm not sure if I consider that a bug in the test or just a bug in the infrastructure. I think often it can be either or both.
There was another package that it assumed the number of cores was a power of 2. So when it ran on the machine with 160 cores, and it just blew up because no.
No, you should be multiple of 2. So the question that we could discuss also today is if we should make these more of a realistic environment by dividing these kind of hosts into more VMs. Obviously that's more work for us, but maybe that also helps performance-wise, so maybe it's a good idea anyway. But I'd like to hear ideas about that. Also, just for fun facts and some stats, since 2019 we processed more than 23 million tests on our infrastructure. Currently there's like 17,000 packages in unstable that have an autopkgtest. In stable that's 14,000, so there you see the increase since the previous release. There's actually a nice overview page where you can see some of the progress of how things evolve, like pass versus fail and stuff like that. Spikes are typically infrastructure problems. And the way we run all of this in the migration software, we have filed more than 2,400 bugs related to the issues that are seen by this. I wanted to highlight one wiki page where you can also add ideas of how stuff should be best practices, because it's a wiki. And now the floor is open for the audience. Please grab a mic.
Is somebody here from the Pearl team? No?
I'm a member, but
Okay.
I speak for it.
So, just because you said you had some experience with an experimental setup,
Cannot tell.
so my fear is that you are ending up with a second unstable environment where you are uploading packages, rebuilding, and trying to keep up that repository with other uploads which happen to unstable during the same time.
Yeah, so what we meant here is that we're not providing the archive. So the different teams currently have their archives. I mean, you have done rebuilds like this as well for Python. So the Ruby have their own archive where they're doing the rebuilds, just to do the smoke testing on the rebuilding. Perl is doing indeed the same. I don't know how far they've automated that with uploads that happen in unstable. So what we're here offering is not that archive. It's really the testing of the stuff that you have in your archive. So We can help with figuring out what to trigger, similar like what Brittany, the migration software, is doing, to figure out what need to trigger. You can also write your own scripts. The website has an API, so you can just script everything that you think is feasible to do your testing, whatever you want to do, as long as you don't overload it, obviously, use sane priority settings, etc., etc. But that's the offer that we do.
Yeah,
here
that's a
on the
facility we are providing teams, but that doesn't affect the official testing migration or anything. It's just so they can test before uploading to Unstable or before starting the transition, so that they know what problems they will see if they start.
And I think the main aim would not be like to be on the individual package level, but to know on the order of magnitude of how much fallout you have, if it's 1, 10, or 100. I think that's more or less the thing that you could get from this.
I mean, if we are doing a Python transition, we have about 3,500 to 4,000 packages, and just uploading those to a PPA or some location and keeping them up to date while the archive is open is interesting.
Sure, I don't have a solution for that. It's just, if you do something like that, this is infrastructure that you could use it to do more with the archive you have, whatever quality of that archive is that you have. Anybody online that's asking problems?
No. Walter is saying, so Walter says, I don't think you should try harder to create a more realistic environment. People may want to run the software in such an environment in production, and then it's good that we know of this problem. Yeah, fair enough. Those funny cases we found, we did report bugs about them, and they were handled more or less right. At least the one about the number of cores being power of 2 was handled by upstream. So
maybe even, I don't recall that one.
Yeah.
But yeah. I do feel a bit troubled sometimes with filing the bugs that are really only causing on this kind of infrastructure, where it looks like, yeah, but this is a uncommon setup. I mean, I'm of the opinion that the test should be resilient to that, but of course that's only so far that you can go, because of course it is more work.
But 160 cores on an ARM HF machine is totally unrealistic.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
On AMD 64, it's maybe lesser.
So, well, I have more experience with auto package tests on Ubuntu, and there we have constrained the machines running these auto package tests, I think, to 1 CPU and to 1 gigabyte of RAM.
1.5.
Oh, wow, okay. Then we have an exception list for some tests which require more resources. Yeah, I'm not sure if that manual management is, well...
I think that would be a nice next GSOC project or outreach.
Right.
Currently, our infrastructure would not allow to do this kind of mix and
Yeah.
match. We have multiple reasons why we would want that, so we have bugs
But
open on that.
I would like us to document what resources the auto package testers are using, and having that documentation up to date, maybe.
It's one of my open issues on my to-do
Okay.
list, so yes, I'm aware of that. That would be nice if that
And then you can point people to that documentation
Yeah.
and saying, we are trying to run that in that environment,
Yep.
and we are failing.
Yeah, I already played with it a tiny bit, but I need to find some way of nicely automating that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, first, thank you guys for working on this amazing piece of infrastructure. So, what caught my attention is better support for QEMU item. So I'm just trying to understand how that relates to the isolation machine limitations that we currently have, or maybe had. And there are plans for addressing that.
Okay, those are improvements on auto package test itself, on building images. So because there were several assumptions that didn't only worked for x86. So now you can build ARM VMs with auto package test -build -QEMU. But yeah, actually having QEMU machines in the infrastructure is pending for a while, and we get asked this every year. maybe we should just
Right, so it is not hard.
solve this forever.
Obviously, if people are aware of, are knowledgeable on these kind of things, I basically have no experience with QEMU. My previous laptop couldn't even run the thing, so I never really played with it. As a sysadmin, I'm really learning. I mean, this is my first more than one server setup that I'm running. I mean, it's a lot of new things out there, for me at least. So if people think, hey, I know about this and know how this could be set up. What I do want, or what I would like as a other CAP-on release team member, I think it would be good that we would have per architecture only one configuration that we're running on. So that would need some thinking of what is feasible and what not. Of course, there with the whitelisting and pointing certain workers to certain packages, or all the release team packages to only a couple of workers, those things could solve that, but all of that is not in place. So all of that would need work, which I would love to have, but there's only so many hours in a day.
So for big transitions, you have to trigger with more than one package in unstable. For example, adding a new Python version, a supported version. So you have then, for example, 3.9 and 3.10, and then you are collecting packages in unstable which are built for both. And then the packages, the tests are triggered then against the release pocket, or the testing pocket, and then don't find the extensions built for both Python versions. So in Ubuntu, every developer is able to trigger against multiple packages, and we have a catch up, all proposed, which triggers against everything available in unstable. Is that worth implementing for Debian as well?
Obviously, that's more of a question to the release team than to the CI team, because we run the infrastructure, but not how the release team triggers it. Obviously, I am the
could you change that?
same that do that. If you have ideas of how that could or should be implemented in a sane way in our infrastructure, we can talk about that. Currently, the code that we run, and actually I think Ubuntu is very similar, but apparently there are more options outside of the automated tooling that can do that. We can think about how to do these kind of things. Another thing, but that's also much more with my release team CAP-on, and a desire that some of the release team have at least, is to think about dropping or doing much less bin NMUs and doing sourceful uploads. I think that would also catch quite a lot of these problems. But that's a different topic.
So on IRC, Edge Linux says, there are some packages, autopkgtest didn't support RISC-V. Is there a better way to deal with? Well, that depends how exactly they didn't support RISC-V. But yeah, it's complicated. Usually it's a per package, or maybe per type of package, like per programming language or per framework or whatever, but we would need to know more details about the case. There is also Walter suggesting using Vagrant to automate create and destroy the VMs. You can generate a Vagrant file with boot VMs. Yeah, running the VMs is not the problem. Autopkgtest already does that, and that's easy. The issue is orchestrating the infrastructure to actually know which package needs to be sent to a QEMU worker, and how we are going to present that, because, well, yeah, because we have to be transparent on what is tested where. So you can just have the package being arbitrarily tested on different backends without letting the users know which backend was it. So we probably want to display that in the user interface somehow, so that people know that this package was tested on QEMU, this one was tested on LXC, and that.
And also some of our hosts don't support running
Yes.
QEMU. So
Yes, yes.
because it's already a VM where that's not possible. So it's not possible across the boards that we currently have. At least.
When it happens, it's going to be most probably for x86 and ARM64, or for both 64 architectures. Another question from Walter. We had a bit of discussion last year about perhaps creating a script that allows an auto package test. We easily create a VM to test early boot, etc. Did anything happen towards that, or we are the patches are welcome stage? Yes.
Very easy answer. I saw some. Okay. Just, no more questions. Anybody having issues with running their test? Yeah, get a mic. There's one over there and one over there.
So a bit on short notice, but I mean, I wanted to count the number of source packages we currently have. So certainly a lot of packages still lack an auto-package test.
I think about 50%.
Do you have ideas why this happened? Do you have ideas how to improve the situations? Seems like you don't. Well, then let me add another thing without prior checking, and it's how to implement auto-package test for my individual package. You provided some documentation links. I often feel a bit lost when it's beyond, say, rerunning a test suite that was part of the packaging. Do you have more recipes, or can you point at packages like that? Is this a good place to start from? My, in a way, final challenge was graphical applications, where I want to identify buttons and all that stuff. I think we have this discussing this somewhere else these days, but I could use a hands-on on this, and possibly many people more.
Yeah, so I think you asked a couple of questions. Let me start with the first. If I forget one, please repeat it. So with respect to what to run, I think, so a lot of packages just implement the build time tests, and that works quite well for quite a lot of packages. Mind you that you should really try hard to test the as installed packages instead of testing the build tree or the unbuilt tree, but really in the source. So really try to test the binaries and not the tree. And I think for a lot of packages that I think is already enough, and that serves a good purpose. Of course, you can think of doing more, particularly regarding the GUIs or the Windows things. It's also still on my to-do list to figure out how that's done, but I know that quite some GNOME packages actually use the accessibility bus to test things. Now, of course, you don't want to try out each and every button in the GUI that's there. But I think that makes a good thing for a superficial test. Yeah, try out a couple of things, see that it doesn't break. The great thing is that you're also testing accessibility at the same time, which is great for the people that need these kind of technologies to access Windows. And then indeed, if you do that a bit, then it's a good superficial test. If you run a lot of complicated things, then of course it's a full-blown test. I would love to create a template or a couple of examples to do that. I think we collected a couple of ideas already last time. Yeah. I think it's in the auto package test help. There's already a couple of links like this package, this framework exists, but none of them I've tried myself, so I can't.
Yeah, so let me make this a broad appeal. So if somebody has already something to borrow from, please let us know.
Usually, these type of accessibility features are tied to the toolkit. So GTK has one, I think Qt has one as well. But there are also tools that go directly on the X protocol and try to do things by triggering X events. So you can try that if you're not using GTK or Qt. A question from IRC at Linux. Do we need tests for font packages? Well, I don't know much about fonts, but I know that when you install a font, there is some work that happens in the background. Like, what's the name of the thing that manages fonts?
Font config.
Font config. Yes, I guess triggering font. Well,
But
that
that's
gets
more
triggered.
of a PU part.
Yeah, that gets
So
triggered in the installation. So I don't know.
one of the comments here also was like, please don't just add a test that does not much more than
Yes.
bin true, which is basically testing installability. We do have infrastructure for that, so really don't do this. Actually, by now this is a RC bug if you only do this and nothing more.
Yeah.
That's a bit abusing the system. So, but again, anything more, it can be marked as superficial and go
Yeah,
from there.
even called foo-bar -- help. And if that
That's
doesn't
a
crash,
test.
that's already
Superficial,
something.
but
It's a superficial test, but it's already useful.
Yep. So this is indeed where we try to collect that. I thought one of these had basically your question of examples of what to do. I don't think anybody has added yet anything, but if you find a good example, please add it to this issue.
Someone suggested me to, in my control file, to call the DH auto test from Debian rules. What do you think about that? So because I had so many build time tests.
As I said, I think
Right, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but I fear that what you then get is running on the source tree instead of on the build packages. So just doing that is probably...
In many cases, it doesn't change much.
Maybe. So, of course, you have to see what the test actually does. I mean, if it does test something, but not much, then mark it superficial if that's all you want to add.
Yeah, you can check by moving away the source directory. So, for instance, in a Python package, you usually have one directory that's the main Python module. You move that away and run the test. If it works, it's because it's using the version style on system-wide.
So apparently that's one thing that's done. Is somebody here from the KDE team? No? Okay. So they disable testing during the build and then rebuild the package during the autopackage test and run the test. So in the times where we only had AMD64 for autopackage tests, that means you are only tested on AMD64 and you waste a lot of resources on the autopackage test.
Yes, that's the second bullet point on the don't list. Of course, we don't really have the cycles to track down every package that does that, but when we find it, we complain.
And of course, for some testing, you do need to do the build, so that's why the option is there. But please don't do it graciously, because, yeah, ideally, for testing the as-installed binaries, you don't need to rebuild the binaries.
Andreas says on IRC, a hint for the question before, when you have package that you need to add autopkgtest, do an outreach project and let students create tests for the package on your team. This works really great for the Debian Med, for the team for years. The good thing is that you have tiny chunks of work which can get to an end, which makes sense, I guess, yes. And it's a good introduction to packaging and testing and everything infrastructure. So that's probably a good idea.
Of course, there's a couple of more generic recommendations about quality test. I regularly see failures where it's just that a new package triggers that your test actually uses is testing for the message in an error message or in a warning. Now, that's of course for upstream CI maybe extremely nice and useful, but indeed in the context of auto-package test, the underlying packages can change and then the test fails. So this, if you're able to spot these kind of things and communicate about them with upstream, that is for auto-package test increasing the quality, that you don't suddenly break the test just because something deeper in the stack changes. The same I'd like to say about deprecation warnings. I regret a bit that the design of auto-package test is that an output on standard error is a failure of auto-package test. At least that's the default. There's quite a lot to say that that's a good idea, but obviously it's also a bad idea. Because of the both cases, I'm not inclined to actually change it now, but if your ecosystem that you work in work with deprecation warnings, if the underlying stuff gets updated, Python is an example where that happens, and Ruby and Perl, then it might be good to at least check the disable standard error or make sure that deprecation warnings are not enabled during auto-package testing. Some of these infrastructures do allow for that. And you just say, don't give me deprecation warnings because that's really something for upstream CI frameworks, but not for auto-package test.
And in those cases, it's easy to just discard, well, at least not discard, but at least declare that you don't care about output on a standard error.
That's the brute force solution. As I said, I think that would have been maybe a better default for auto-package test. But I'm also not going to change it now anymore. But yeah, if you don't want to dive too deep in, then adding that restriction is a good thing to do. Any more notes on the Etherpad? Nope.
There is.
Anything else? Apart from the dreams that you think of what the CI infrastructure could do in the distant future. Apart from missing architectures, what do we have to change or improve? Or?
Who wants to debug test failures on MIPS?
I can do the reporting like I do now. If no more comments, I suggest we stop and do the rest in the corridor, hallway, track.
Yeah, let's do that. So thank you everyone for coming, and if you want to know anything, we'll be here until the end of the conference. You can talk to us, and that's it. Thank you.
And after that, on mail IRC, we have our own channel, #depc, not to be confused with Debian CI. I shouldn't have said that because now everybody goes there. Great, thank you.